Dan Probst is with Jones Lang LaSalle in Chicago. He is the chairman of Energy and Sustainability, and the theme of his presentation to the 2009 CTBUH Conference was What Clients Want in Sustainable Buildings. Thanks for coming to visit with us.
My pleasure.
How did you become involved in, well, first you should tell us about your company and about what it does and what you do.
Okay, Jones Lang LaSalle is a real estate services company, so we provide a broad range of real estate services around the globe, everything from project development and project management, building new buildings, building out space in existing buildings, to project financing. We do transactions work, helping clients buy and sell property or lease or sublease space. We've got a big project property management. We manage over 1 billion square feet of property around the world, both for investors, think multi-tenant office buildings or shopping malls, or for corporations. We do facilities management for the space that they own and occupy for their own use. The group that I run is known as Energy and Sustainability Services, and broadly we've developed a capability to help our clients meet their goals for energy and sustainability in the built environment. Whatever those goals may be, which are often represented in goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a certain percent by a certain year, and recognizing that particularly companies that are in the services industry, like a bank, their carbon footprint is either in their real estate or in their transportation, and if they're going to achieve those goals, they need to make their buildings perform more efficiently, utilizing their real estate to use less space, for instance.
How long has this been a service area?
Well, we've had an energy services capability for as long as we've been in the property and facilities management business, just recognizing that that's a big part of your ongoing obligation when you manage properties, is to manage them as efficiently as possible. But about 3 years ago, we formed this separate practice in the firm that focuses on energy and sustainability, and kind of broadens the topic from just energy to thinking about energy, waste, and water, and using space more efficiently, and some of the other aspects that would impact an environmental footprint.
So this is a relatively new service line. What is driving the sustainability bandwagon? Because it seems in years past it's taken a while for this to catch on, and while it was a good idea, I know personally I was a little skeptical about the return of investment and whether or not this was really a money-making proposition, which is as it should be. You know, yes, it's the right thing to do, but is it affordable and does it make sense? How has that changed in recent years? Well,
it's changed dramatically. And just a few years ago, the discussion did revolve around it being the right thing to do, and those of us who were involved in it, a lot of discussion about trying to convince people that it was the right thing to do because of climate change and global warming, and we would get into the discussions with the Al Gore style slides and the impact of carbon and why we as a society and industry need to focus on this. The conversation has shifted quite dramatically in the last few years. One, companies are seeing just a lot of pressures. They see pending regulation potentially coming their way. They see the high cost of energy. They have tenants or employees, customers, shareholders that are all beginning to put pressure on companies to be more environmentally friendly. So they're feeling a lot of these pressures, but the biggest shift has been when companies are now just recognizing that it makes good business sense and it's really a good business opportunity. In the current economic environment, they recognize that retrofitting buildings or making buildings perform better or utilizing space more efficiently translates into operating cost savings. And so that's a big driver right now, is just the financial impact. So cost savings, big impact. Come back to a nuance on that in a second. Studies that show that high performance buildings or green buildings are just a better work environment. Turnover goes down. There's studies that suggest that absenteeism is reduced anywhere from 10 to 18% in a high performance building. Studies that show that prospective employees look at the environmental track record of a company before they join that company. And so companies want to appear to be environmentally friendly, and their buildings are a big manifestation of their own beliefs about energy and sustainability. I said come back to the cost piece, and a key there that has also changed is that a few years ago, building new buildings or building out space in existing buildings that met high performance standards or LEED standards, for instance, had somewhat of a cost premium associated with it. That premium has virtually disappeared. And that's because architects and engineers now know how to design this way. The materials and the equipment are much more readily available, and there's a bigger market, so it drives down cost. So, for instance, recycled or recyclable materials are much more readily available than they were a few years ago. And so for what little remaining premium there might be, there's a pretty quick payback to make these investments in buildings. So costs and cost savings, the opportunity to drive cost savings has been a big driver behind the movement.
Well, so the return on investment is there now, certainly, where a few years ago, maybe not as much.
It is. You know, energy costs, though they leveled out a little bit, continue to escalate, and projections are that they will continue to escalate. Technology continues to get better. People that looked at a lighting retrofit, for instance, a few years ago and may not have met their rate of return requirements, we suggest should relook at those projects. The technology's gotten better, the cost savings have gotten bigger, and a project that may have not have made sense a few years ago might make sense now just because the economics keep changing.
In your presentation, you made the point that nearly 75% of U.S. commercial building stock is over 20 years old, and 72% was built before 1990, which is a big number. And we're certainly seeing some pretty prominent buildings go with retrofits. They're talking about it at Sears Tower, which you've not been involved with, but you have been involved with the Empire State Building, which was a big newsmaker. Describe that project a little bit, and what's the progress of that?
Well, yeah, and the Empire State Building is just a great example of building owners recognizing that there is huge opportunity. And the owners of the Empire State Building, first saw the opportunity, but also wanted to make a statement. You know, there's a building that's an iconic building because of its history and architecture. They want to be an iconic building because it's going to be a green, high-performing building, and making an example to others that you can take a 1930s vintage building and make smart investments in energy retrofit projects that bring it up to meeting or exceeding standards of new buildings that are being built today, and recognizing that because there are so many existing buildings out there and the age of those existing buildings, there's tremendous amount of opportunity to reduce energy consumption, have an impact on greenhouse gases by addressing our existing built environment. The Empire State Building project is interesting for a lot of reasons, but one of them was the process that we went through collectively, we being the owner and a design team that came together. The design team was Jones Lang LaSalle, the Rocky Mountain Institute, Johnson Controls, and the Clinton Climate Initiative, and really went through a very deliberate, iterative process to consider a wide variety of projects that might improve the performance of the building. There were over 60 discrete projects that were evaluated, and went through a lot of different design models and design iterations, and recognizing that if we sort of took the right things in the right order, first make the building shell, for instance, much more energy efficient, can then impact what we need to do to the central plant and how big that central plant needs to be. I think one of the things that's most interesting is that as we went through that process and calculated rate of return of the different potential projects, it ended up being narrowed down to 8. And if you look at those 8, they aren't high-tech, glitzy type things like putting solar panels on the roof or adding wind turbines, which were things that were considered. But it's retrofitting the windows. So there's 6,500 windows that will be retrofit on site to add an additional pane. Doing it on site means we're not taking the old windows out and they're ending up in the landfill. It's reducing transportation costs, so the whole process is very environmentally friendly. And then while we're at it, we're adding insulation behind the existing radiators because the current design allows about as much heat to go outside the building as radiates into the building, so we're adding a reflective barrier behind the radiators. Pretty simple, stuff, but big impact. And and then some of the other key things are new control systems in the building, new lighting upgrades to be able to take advantage of natural day lighting with automatic dimming and dimmable ballasts. Upgrading the central plant. We're not replacing it. We're just upgrading the plant. So it came down to some pretty fundamental projects, but the end result will be over $4 million a year in savings. It's just about a 3-year payback on the investments that they're making in the energy retrofit. So it's economic. The finance proves out. And again, example that if that building, a 1930s building can do it, then a lot of buildings should be able to come to the same conclusion.
Well, and they are. They're starting to, with the Sears Tower, and these are things that are going to have to be done anyway as a building ages. Is there a real glut coming here in terms of buildings that are going to require this? With so many buildings coming of age in the next few decades, this has got to be a growth industry.
Excuse me. I absolutely think it's a growth industry, huge opportunity. When you talk about the new clean economy or green economy, these opportunities are going to create jobs. So you wonder why it's maybe not happening any even faster. And a bit of it, there are some obstacles, particularly in the current economic environment. Access to capital is an issue for some owners. But that'll work its way through the system. The government's looking at creating incentives or low-cost loan programs. Utility companies are coming out with incentive programs. So there's going to be a lot of things that break through those barriers, and then I do think we'll see a glut of retrofit-type activity. And people, again, recognizing that these huge opportunity to really, we're talking, 30%, 40% reductions in energy consumption in existing buildings.
The market wants, according to your notes here, transparency, metrics, and results in these kind of refits, which I can certainly understand the metrics and the results. What's transparency in this context?
Well, transparency is just the fact that in our industry, it's very difficult for buyers, if you're buying a building or leasing space in a building, to evaluate and understand the true environmental performance of the building. There's not today a good, consistent set of benchmarks where you can easily and readily compare the ongoing performance of one building to the next. You're starting to see movements in that direction. In Europe, they have a program of energy performance certificates that were legislated by the European Union, and they have to put labels on the building. And prospective tenants could literally walk down the street and compare one building to the next on a fairly equal basis. The EPA Energy Star program is a big step in that direction. It's just energy. It doesn't look at overall sustainability, but it's voluntary. And we really think that some sort of labeling, some sort of certification, some sort of consistent way of measuring performance of buildings and enable buyers and potential tenants to compare one to the next much more readily is something that the industry needs. And I think that begins to drive the industry overall. Again, the Energy Star labels, if you look at what happened to appliances when the EPA started requiring labels on appliances, suddenly appliances got much more efficient. Refrigerators got 30% more efficient in a very short period of time because buyers could discriminate and make decisions based on the performance of the appliance. If users of space and tenants can make those same kind of decisions, then owners are going to recognize that they have to make investments to improve if they're going to be competitive.
The economy's kind of tight right now, kind of a down economy, which of course we're all hoping will come back sooner rather than later. Is this a good investment, a good thing to do now?
We believe it is. Energy costs are only going to continue to go up. And when the economy does begin to turn around and activity being, people leasing space or users making decisions about occupancy begins to pick up, we do see tenants adding the performance of a building to their shopping criteria. And so why not get ready for that now and make the investments now? The payback is there. Energy costs are going to continue to go up. We just think it makes good business sense.
I wanted to talk about some of the important building features that you have listed, and I guess these are the things that potential tenants are looking for, if not demanding anymore. And just the three that kind of got my attention immediately was public transportation options, which in a place like Chicago is certainly important, but in places like Hong Kong, they're starting to build buildings at transit centers, and taking that into account. Anything to add to that? I mean,
Well, there's a whole term now of transit-oriented development, and recognizing that users of space want to be either close to public transportation or close to where they live, people want to have those options. One of the striking things that you see happen sometimes is that there's a brand new LEED certified building may get built, but it could get built in a greenfield site far from an urban center. And while the building may perform very, very well from an overall energy standpoint, the occupants are using a lot of carbon and gas to get there. And the overall picture is not great. So when you think about the overall picture, so it's not just the bricks and mortar of the building, but how people are getting to and from the building, then access to public transportation or being close to public transportation, raises way up on the priority list.
Another point here is maximized daylight with controls. I know that's been a real issue in some buildings that I've worked in, especially when one side of the building is hotter than the other. That can be really annoying. Maximize daylights with controls. What are all of the aspects of that?
Well, that's a great question, because there are a lot of aspects to think about that maybe sometimes go unnoticed. So the idea is that when there is good natural daylight, you want to take advantage of that and have control systems in place that will either dim or turn off the artificial lighting in the space. And that technology is there to do that. And you're seeing that also combined with window shades that will open and close and adjust in response to the natural daylight. But then you have to weigh that sometimes against the incremental solar heat load that comes from allowing that in. So if you don't have windows that are designed to allow in the lighting, but reflect the heat load from the sun, you can get overheated on one side of the building, and so then the controls get a little more complicated, because then you want to close the shades instead of opening them. But balancing all that out, the technology is there to do that, and you have dimmable ballasts and fluorescent fixtures that again, a technology that just wasn't readily available just not too many years ago, and so it's there today. And you see a lot of people that want to take advantage of that. The buildings, again, natural daylighting, designing space so that penetrates further into the space, so not putting all your ceiling high offices around the perimeter, and more open office environment with views and lighting is something that employees like. And back to the attracting and retaining employees and making it a better work environment. Those are the kinds of things that also contribute to that, while contributing to lower operating expenses.
Am I right in thinking that some of these older buildings don't necessarily have floor-to-ceiling windows, and there are things that can be done in buildings with smaller windows, I would expect?
Yeah, I can. You do get sometimes limited on the envelope of the building that you're on an existing building. But even, we were surprised with the Empire State Building. It's not a glass curtain wall. There are individual windows, but they're letting in more natural daylight than 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 you may have thought. Being an older building, a lot of the floors had a lot of ceiling-high offices, and once we demoed some floors and really opened that up, we saw that there was an opportunity to take advantage of daylighting and do the things I just talked about, put in dimmable ballasts and lighting controls that would allow the space to be lit from the outside when it's available.
This is kind of a, hopefully not too vague of a question, but I just thought of it listening to you talk here. Does the Empire State Building, is this, all of these changes going to change the way the building behaves overall, the overall internal feel? Is that going to be something that's dramatic, the feel of the building?
Well, yeah, the energy work is being done in conjunction with some overall retrofit work of the building, and a lot of it you would sort of label as kind of opening things up, refurbishing the lobby, kind of restoring it back to its original grandeur, so you get rid of old drop ceilings that hid some of the beautiful things that were behind it. And the same thing up on the floors. Again, think older buildings, you get off the elevators, corridors, and lots of doors to small individual offices. Now you get off the elevators, big open floor plates with views to the outside. So it'll be a much more open, well-lit type of environment than kind of the cave feeling that you sometimes get in those older office buildings.
We just saw yesterday at the John Hancock Center when we took our technical tour, chiller plant retrofits. And they've got original equipment in the building that goes back to 1968, and that's something that they're kicking around. What's different about the technology of the chillers now versus 40 years ago? Chillers are chillers, but what's different now? Anything?
Well, I mean, they keep coming up with new technology, just, the motors and motor windings and motors design are more efficient than they were 30, 40 years ago. Just, small elements of things that they can do with retrofitting existing chillers. It doesn't always mean that you have to take out the old ones and put new ones in. Different types of control systems that adjust to more dynamically adjust to the current loads in the building. And chillers become most inefficient when they're operating at part load capacity. And so if you have controls that allow the chiller to more readily adjust to the loads in the building, or to stage multiple chillers to adjust to, so you're running one chiller at full capacity instead of 3 at part load capacity or 2 at part load capacity, the overall plant becomes much more efficient.
I've got a 90-some-year-old house that the systems in there just constantly make me crazy, and so everyone with an old building, and they're all going to get old sooner or later, is going to have to do some amount of replacing systems just because they break down and they get old and et cetera. So long term, this is a growth industry of sorts, and ultimately a good thing for people to do, not necessarily because they want to, but because they have to, right?
Well, I think, yes, I think they have to, because buildings that don't take advantage of these opportunities, Class A buildings today that, I think at some point will become considered lower class buildings. They're going to be energy inefficient, and their costs will be high, and there are going to be competitive alternatives in the marketplace. So again, the market will begin to drive some of this, and tenants are going to go to the buildings that are more efficient. Home buyers are focusing on that more today than they used to, thinking about energy costs and the efficiency of homes. And so you see it across the board. It's raised up in the consciousness of consumers and office corporations, and the technology keeps improving. And so I think the demand will be ongoing to constantly improving the performance of buildings.
Dan Probst is the chairman of Energy and Sustainability with Jones Lang LaSalle in Chicago, and spoke about sustainability and it being a growth market. Thank you for dropping by.